In this episode, I want to talk about an experience that completely transformed my understanding of myself and my own power. It was, in many ways, a moment of awakening. And the reason I'm sharing this story today is because there is a very specific way that so many of us choose to stay stuck and small and looking at a situation we want to change, but feel powerless to. And I know this because it's what I was doing before this moment. And I want to talk about what it takes to change that and how I stumbled into the way that I could change that for myself so that you can do that maybe a little more consciously. And what I've learned as a coach and in working with men to do exactly this work, to reclaim more presence, more access, more inner wisdom and power, is that simply deciding to do this is often the difference between being on a trajectory of growth and being on a trajectory of despair. Just deciding to make a change. This is the difference between making change that ignites you and enlivens you and repeating a pattern that hurts, that you wish you could change, but you don't and stay stuck in. And really, I think the reason we get stuck instead of making change, right? The reason we choose that stuckness, consciously or not, is because so often we want to avoid seeing and being with the hurt parts of us, the parts of us we're afraid of, the parts of us that sometimes we even hate. And so our strategy is ignoring and avoiding them, which ultimately just means that we spend so much energy pushing these parts away that they end up controlling us and defining the trajectory of our lives. Now, what I learned through the experience that I'm going to talk about today, I was lucky to learn in such a powerful way because I was just walloped by it. And the lesson in that moment was this: the problems we perceive in our lives are not because our hurt parts exist, but because we don't accept responsibility for them, for caring for them, for knowing them. And that responsibility is uniquely our own. And we don't choose to be hurt, but we do choose to avoid our pain. And that choice has serious consequences. So in this episode, I want to talk about what happens when we finally choose to stop the pattern that we create by avoiding pain. Because when we get adept with knowing and owning what's inside of us, with really embodying the fact that our inner world is our own personal responsibility, we become the authors of our own lives. This is the door to the power that lives inside of you that's available to all of us. Now, at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you a sequence that you can use to unlock this power when you're stuck, when you're spiraling, or just feeling disconnected and uninspired. So stay with me. This is Reclaiming the Gentle Man. I'm Dave Lashansky. I spent so much energy for a long time in my life staying hidden, on keeping small, on making sure that other people's experience of me was good, and ignoring the fact that my own experience of life often felt hollow. And it wasn't just like something was missing, but I was stuck in this cycle and this energy of blame. I would blame others, mostly my partner. I would blame my situation. I need more money. I need more time. I would blame society. All these things that I didn't directly control. And I did this all in an attempt, albeit unconsciously, but in an attempt to avoid taking action, meaningful action. And what this meant was avoiding tending to the deeper hurt that, unbeknownst to me, was running the show. And I was in this cycle. I would stay in this pattern of blaming and blaming. It's her fault. She needs to change. If I had more money, I could. If I had more time, I could. If I had more energy, I could. If she'd stop asking me, I could. If things weren't like this, I could. And I would stay in this stuckness, blaming everything until inevitably things would blow up in my face. It'd be in an argument or I'd burn out. And then I'd go quiet. And I'd spend a day or a week or even months moving through life in this sleepiness, in this state of trying to cope for however long I could. And the cycle would repeat and repeat and repeat until I decided to stop it. Now, at the time when I did decide to stop, it wasn't a conscious choice to stop blaming things outside of myself. I wasn't aware that I was stuck in this state of blaming, but I was aware of one thing. And this is probably the simplest way for most of us to begin on this path of change. I was aware that I was tired. I was aware that I wanted something to change, something had to give. I was tired of editing myself to try to make other people feel good. I was exhausted by not knowing what I wanted, by not feeling safe or comfortable voicing what I want, choosing what I want. I was tired of always trying to avoid being embarrassed, being seen, being witnessed in the things that I felt were weak or shameful about myself. And the defining moment in which I recognized that I was tired, that moment when I finally decided to stop this pattern and change something, was when I was sitting in my very first men's intensive. Now, I joined this intensive without a whole lot of intention, but this frustration, right? This sense of tiredness, specifically with the idea that I didn't know what I wanted. That was scary to me. And somewhere deep down, I knew that that wasn't right. And I was tired of living without knowing what I wanted. And so when the circle opened up, I'm sitting in this group of 10 men in this beautiful house in San Diego. And we were all at once given the opportunity to step in, to be witnessed by this group, to be guided through whatever we wanted to work on. And I remember it so clearly. I heard this booming voice inside of me say one word. It said, trust. And from that moment on, I was a different man. And it's not because something magically changed me. And it's not because I was healed and all my work was done. No. In that moment, in that circle, I decided to trust someone. I decided to trust this group to hold a part of me, to hold me, and the parts of me that I was so sure were unlovable, the parts of me that I was afraid to look at. I decided to trust and to surrender my shield. And what happened was, the thing that changed me was I learned that not only could I look at the things that I thought would kill me, but I could share them. I could be open about them. I learned that acknowledging the parts of me that I don't like isn't as scary as I thought it was. I didn't die. I wasn't shunned. I didn't lose everything. And in fact, I was embraced. I was acknowledged for my courage. I was loved for my honesty and the way that that deepened the space for all of us. And what happened for me in that specific circle was an opening to my inner world that until that moment had just been shut off, sealed shut. And for me, the part that I discovered that was waiting for me at the entrance once I'd finally opened that door, decided to trust. And once I was really expertly guided to explore that part of me, was anger. I had this seething rage inside of me that scared the living shit out of me. For my entire life, I took pride in turning the other cheek and never getting angry. I would let people walk all over me, and I would internalize it and bury it and sit on my throne of righteous indifference. And I would just bury that anger deep, deep in my body. And I was certain that this is what made me special and good and worthy of love. But in that circle, when I heard that word, when I heard the word trust, I allowed myself to be led into that anger, into that part of me that I'd rejected and decided wasn't inside of me, wasn't a part of me. Completely disowned it, simply because it scared me. And I chose to do this, to trust doing this in front of other men that could hold space, men that were on this journey too. And I ended up being really being inside of that anger in that space. And in doing so, for the first time in my life, I was unburdened by the weight of carrying it for so long and finally choosing to let it go free, to not hold it and squeeze it and shut it down. And all it took was one simple step to unlock. Deciding to put myself in a supportive space and to look at the things that I was afraid to look at and to say the things that I thought would kill me. And what this experience gave me was more than relief. What it gave me was access to my inner world, to the parts of my inner world that were unknowingly controlling my life, right? Not expressing this part of me was something that took all my energy because it had been building and building and building. It would explode out of me through that blame, through being angry at things that I was powerless to change because that was safer. Safer than being angry about the stuff I was really angry about. The ways I wasn't being heard. The ways I'd grown up not being heard. Not being known, not being understood and cared for in the ways that I needed. It was so much safer to be angry at society and my partner and my situation than to stand up for myself, than to ask for what I needed, for what I wanted, to risk genuinely pursuing something that I cared about. And so the reason I'm sharing this story is because there's a piece of advice men are often given, and that doesn't really work. It can cause a ton of issues in relationship. So often men are told to be vulnerable, to open up, and most of us don't know what to do with that. I certainly didn't. Even if we're given a supportive space, being told to be vulnerable, to open up, to be open, doesn't work because so many of us, like me, have these sealed off parts that just don't register as accessible or even existing, right? So if something doesn't exist for us, if we're unaware that it's there, it doesn't work to tell someone to open it up. It doesn't work to access it by asking them to be vulnerable. But what does work, right? What does give you that same effect that you want when you ask someone to open up or when you're invited to be vulnerable? That's actually real and actionable, is framing this a little bit differently. So instead of be vulnerable, be open, let's talk instead about the growth that we experience when we take full responsibility for our inner world. When we decide to explore there with curiosity that could open up growth. right? I grow when I decide to be responsible for the way that I act and how I show up. I grow when I decide to be responsible for all of me. That is a very different approach than being vulnerable. I grow when I recognize that my wounds and my choices are related, and that I have more power to affect change in my life when I recognize this, when I own that. It speaks to the reward of vulnerability instead of the risk. It puts it in terms that call us higher rather than make us afraid. And so if you've been told to be vulnerable, consider what it would be like to grow into a more full responsibility of leading yourself and leading your inner world. Because when we take responsibility for what's alive, what's been ignored, what we don't know exists inside of us, that's how we become the people we want to be. That's how we become the man we want to be. This is our way in. And yes, it's not necessarily easier than being vulnerable. And this can be the most courageous thing. It often is the most courageous thing we do in life. I believe it is the most noble pursuit. And it's not easy. It brings up shame. It brings up grief and anger. It can bring up all kinds of wounds and hurts. All kinds of social norms we're forced against our will to comply with, or that we're forced to contend with. It brings up the ways that the things we don't like about ourselves impact our lives. And it makes us look at it. And yet, when we do choose to do this, when we choose to step in and own our inner world, to lead our younger parts and our hurt parts, our sad and embarrassed parts, our struggling and uncertain parts. In doing that, we tap into our most potent selves, our true power, our most brilliant and magnetic presence. And most importantly, by choosing to step in and explore and own and lead our own inner world, we can access that feeling of aliveness that we're searching for in any moment. Because the truth is that we lead ourselves wherever we direct our attention. When that attention is directed by love and acceptance and a desire to be better, we create that for ourselves. And when that attention is directed by fear and by self-criticism, and hiding the things that we don't like or accept about ourselves, we create more of that for ourselves too. This is the law of cause and effect. I mean, this is physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And this is happening inside of us, whether we see it, whether we're conscious of it or not. But here's what changes when we decide to lead ourselves consciously, and when we declare self-ownership and responsibility. What happens is we stop looking outside of ourselves to feel better. We stop blaming our partners or our situations for that growing frustration inside of us. And we gain an ability to make more change in life, to make the changes that we most want to see. We gain clarity and a capacity for decisiveness that feels good. I mean, like viscerally feels good to act on. Not only does it feel good, it's incredibly attractive. It's magnetic. So when I stepped into that circle and allowed myself to bear witness to that rage that I was suppressing, when I left, I literally felt like my vision had expanded. Like I could see more. I could take in more of my surroundings, more light. I had so much more energy because I wasn't unconsciously spending it trying to tame these parts of me that I thought were unsafe. And I didn't even know I was doing that. But I know I'm not alone in that experience. Because since that circle, I have sat in hundreds more. And I've heard and I've felt and witnessed countless other men who'd been doing the exact same thing. So when I left that circle, that very first one, I saw how important it is to tend to this part of me. And it started me on a journey that I am still on today. And I probably will be for the rest of my life. I intend to be. And it's really led by one specific principle, that being conscious of my inner world, that expressing instead of suppressing what it is that I find there is how I access that beautiful, powerful, sometimes elusive thing we call presence. And that presence comes with my anger and my grief and my embarrassment and my shame. All that is inside of me are here, are a part of presence. When I pretend that they're not, I can't access that. When I refuse to acknowledge their existence, I can't access my presence. All of what's inside of me is mine to own when I decide to be responsible for it. When I decide that I want to live as much of my life in a state of presence as I can. If I want to live with presence, I have to be with all that is present. It's like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. With great presence comes the same. We are responsible. We must endeavor to be responsible for all of what's inside of us. That is how we achieve that great presence that we want. It's how we access that presence. We can become better at knowing ourselves. And in doing that, we become much better at coming back to this more fulfilling way, at coming back to access to our fuller, most embodied, most alive, most magnetic selves. What it takes is to hold and to own and to lead all of what's inside of us. That's the kind of relationship I care to build. One that is honest about what's inside of me. Relationship with the parts of me that I don't know yet. Relationships with the part of me I'm learning about. Relationships that are built on honesty and trust and transparency. Relationships that don't avoid because it's uncomfortable. Relationships that are accepting and grounded in self-love. That's what I care to build inside myself and the people that I work with. Because this is what makes us safe for our loved ones. This is what opens new worlds of intimacy in our relationships, new levels of success in our work, and new opportunities in life that just surprise and delight. This is the way. Think about it. How would having a more honest relationship with yourself serve you with whatever you're dealing with right now? How would holding what you perceive inside of you with more love and acceptance serve you? So I'm going to offer you some prompts that I'll read off in a second that are also in the show notes if you want to journal with them or reflect on next time you have a free moment. But before I launch into those, I also just want to strongly recommend finding a group where you can be held and supportive. Finding a group of men that are led by a responsible and trauma-informed and caring guide. And if you don't know where to find something like that, if you don't know where to start here, get in touch. I hold groups like this. I have friends that do the same. I have great resources for people that are looking for something similar. And I believe that all of us need this kind of support system outside of our relationship. I don't believe our relationship is the place where we should access this type of support, at least not at first. And I'm going to do an episode on that soon, but just know that there are no substitutes for community. And it is ours to forge. That is our responsibility to forge. So if you need help, get in touch. This is why I do what I do. Okay, so I want to offer these questions for you to reflect on, for you to use to inquire on your own, right here and right now, no group needed. And now after you consider these questions, the right action to take might not come to you right away. If that's the case, the action to take is reflection. That is just as important and valid and too often forgotten. So, I invite you to sit with these questions for a moment, for a day, a week. Write them if you're inclined to. Use them to practice a kind of self-leadership and self-ownership that is radically compassionate and accepting. See what opens up to you. Explore with loving curiosity and trust that you can do it. I promise that you can. Are you ready? What inside of me do I struggle to witness? What does this part of me long to express? What do I struggle to accept as part of me? What would it be like to hold that part? How can I take full responsibility for learning about and leading all of what's inside of me? How can I own the choices that have gotten me here? What would it look like to do that with love and an intention to grow? How can I hold all that's in me with curiosity, with honesty and loving awareness, with kindness? What does that look like in this moment? If you'd like to receive this inquiry as a longer meditation, one with more questions and that you can practice in real time to make space for and get to know those parts of you, send me an email at dave@pornamaclinic.com or just DM me on Instagram at Dave_Lashansky. I'll send you the guided inquiry for free if you want, and I hope it really serves you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Reclaiming the Gentleman. I am honored to have your ears and your time and attention, and I'd love to know what you're interested in hearing about. I'd love to know if this show is serving you, and what do you need? What are you interested in? What are you curious about? I love making these episodes, and I've also committed to not offering interviews that I don't think would be really of service. That being said, there are some amazing people out there that I can't wait to talk to and share with you on this show. So if there is someone who you think would be a great person to talk to on this show, send me that too. I am wishing you so much courage and so much presence in this life. May your journey be filled with loving curiosity and beautiful surprises. Until next time, be well.